going now into the domain of information, so that is the customer's life. Per Lindstedt at Value Model, he used to say, if you don't have a customer, you don't have a business. You have a hobby. And I think that's pretty good. And that's what many technology startups have. They have hobby, actually. You're trying to do the best code ever. And the connection to changing something in reality might be small. So why is this important? Well, all customers have different needs. They have different situations. They are different in terms of personality and age and all those things. That's the starting point. But we're also different in different situations. So me, as whenever I go surfing in Hawaii, I'm a different customer than when I'm lecturing at KTH or Uppsala University. Here I consume other types of functions to get jobs done. Last year on the exam there was a question, what has the higher value, a pizza or a salad? Right? And the answer, this was only a 1-point question, because the answer is it depends. And it depends. I mean, for some people, the pizza has a higher value, and for some other, the salad has a higher value. But even for the same person, you can imagine a situation where you'd rather have a salad than you'd rather have a pizza. So to get the point, you have to break that down a little bit. But it illustrates the point. So, what happens if you don't define the customer? Well, turns out nobody will buy your product just because you think it's great. Isn't that unfortunate? So instead, what will happen is that, especially over time, and if you compete, you will get one of two categories of products. Either you will get a Christmas tree. That's the type of product that has a lot of everything. So these phones now are Christmas trees. 90% of what's in here I don't use. And it's in there because they compete on specs and they want to have a high price point. Yeah, frame rate of 120 hertz. It's 5 times faster than my eyes, probably 10 times faster than my old eyes. So it just consumes battery for me. It's a negative for me as a user. So that's a Christmas tree. We all know such products. Lot of software like Word and so on. You really don't use a lot of the functions in Word. It has so much power that most users are not even aware of. Christmas trees. Problem is that all of it drives the cost, so it becomes more expensive. The other thing that can happen if you compete on something that should fit everybody is that you make it very, very generic and you focus on competing maybe on cost. You produce a lot. That's the tube sock type of product. Nobody wants a tube sock type of product. It fits everybody, but it fits everybody pretty badly. And well, I guess there is a foot in the world that fits good, but it's just a generic thing. It's not adapted to needs specifically. It's always mass market, of course, because it really hinges on the volume to get some margin from that business.
It's like commodity products. Huh?
Yes, very commoditized.
Toothbrushes.
Toothbrush, yeah. And then you have some that they try to make fancier and more special, but generally...
Toothbrush.
Yeah. Okay, so don't make tube socks and don't make Christmas trees. They're not relevant for... Tube socks are not relevant for anybody's needs, and the Christmas tree is over-engineered and too costly. That's what happens if you don't decide who the customer is or don't find out who the customer is. So what are customers? Unfortunately, or fortunately maybe, we can't go to the individual or something like you really measure the person and can have a dialogue. But this is pretty uncommon. Usually we have to take a market. Even business to business, we might have to say that we have a small business offer and a large business offer, and advanced customers and less advanced users and so on. So we group the customers, and there's two ways to do that. And one way is to take the market, and the market is the set of actual and potential customers. And let's say for simplicity that we look at consumers and we say that, all right, we define groups here based on boundaries between different groups. And that's called segments. So segments should be homogeneous inside the segment. The people inside the same segment, it should be fairly similar in terms of whatever product or service we're imagining. The people that are included within the boundaries should have similarities. And there should be large differences between the segments. So if you use boundaries, you could use demographics. And say we have people between 20 and 60, women that have higher education. Okay, so that's a way to divide up a group of people into segments. So, of course, you have 2 segments on the gender, men, women. Then you have 3 segments on the age, 20 to 60. So there's some below 20, some will be over 60, some will be in between. And what did I say? Education, so that's also 2. So that's like 2, 4. In theory, it would be 12 segments. And 1 is our target segment, and the rest might not be our target segment. But demographics are not so good for solving problems and making decisions in the innovation process. Because even if you belong to the group of women between 20 and 60 and have higher education, you can have very different lives, different preferences, different problems, and so on. So we use demographics sometimes, but it's not good. Then you can use behavioral parameters, like those that commute to work in cars and those who go by public transport. So that's more closer to jobs and problems. And best case if you can get to needs. But if you get to needs, like women that need to find their next job, that's useful for defining product service. But then you have the problem sending out the marketing when you're done. And you're going to be doing a campaign and so on. Because all these websites and advertising channels, Google advertising, TV commercials, all that is on demographics. All right, so we talked about segmentation based on variables. And that if you segment on needs, it's difficult to find variables that you can measure and so on. But we can also define the center of each segment. And that's called to work with a persona. So you make up a character that is representing the center of the segment. And it's going to be a made-up person with a little bit of history and the name and so on that characterizes all the customers there. They're like sort of typified, or that's the iconic customer in that group. So these women that need to find a job, we call them Lisas. And another segment might be Carls. So that's men, right? And Carl we describe in a certain way, and Lisa in a certain way, with a certain age, certain problem set, certain ambition level, and so on. All that is relevant for this function that we're trying to design. And then also we might not have only one. So first of all, if you define up 12 segments or so, you can have personas for more than one, right? So maybe you have in a situation where you sell a business-to-business product, you have at least 3 different customers in the company that you sell to, not only one. That's called a customer chain. There, you sell, might be that you sell to Ellen here. Ellen is the meddling middle manager. She's 42. She dislikes trusting others and so on, but she likes to have prestige status and advancement in the company. Nothing should go wrong when she's involved. So she's a little bit of a control freak because she wants to jockey for the next position. It represents people in the company that buy our product and service that will influence the process, but they're not using the product or service, just want to make sure that it doesn't reflect badly on them. How do we make sure that we create a product or service that will not cause problems or make people safe and make people comfortable that if I buy this product, I don't have to worry. Then we have the most important one probably, that's Chad. He's the professional researcher. Chad is 41, he has a PhD in engineering physics, and his ambition is to become well known as an expert. Motivation, enjoys technical challenges. So Chad is motivated by getting new problems. Don't care so much if it's going to be a promotion in the end of this or a little bonus or something like that. Dislikes, also important. Things that don't work. You know, when you're set up and you're going to be doing an experiment and the stuff doesn't work, Chad gets very frustrated and upset. And it could be for good reasons. It could be that there's a lab that costs a lot of money to run and so on. Dislikes also work interruptions. Dislikes explaining to others. Okay, we can relate to this personality. We all know a Chad, I think. And then what do they need? The latest tech. Okay, so they are driving R&D in this company, and the company wants to have the best products and services, get them out in the market. Okay, so they need good stuff in the lab. And then access to information. Chad is not price sensitive. He's not paying, so he doesn't care. Links technology to competitive advantage. So it's okay, a little bit of feeling that if we have the better technology, we can have a little bit better product, and that will make our business result for the long term actually better. So there's some awareness. Now, I'm making these examples up, but when you do a real product and service development project, you should base it a little bit on research and experience, of course. And then we have another one that might be important influencer for the sales process. That's the service person in this case, Ricky, Mr. Fix-It. Ricky is 29 and has high school and vocational training. So that person has other motivations and ambitions. And then you can add quotes. So one quote here from Ellen is, good enough is good enough. That also gives you a feeling for what this person is like. Chad will say, only the best is good enough. And Ricky says, I told you so. That represents the attitude here. And of course I can fix it, but can you handle it? So what you want to do is to make them come alive. Based on insights in the market, you try to create figures that come alive. And then you can say, so let's say that you are engineers and you're doing the programming for your little service that goes into a bigger product that's going to be in a system that you're going to sell. And the marketing person comes and asks something or requests something. You say, yeah, we can do that, but Ellen won't like it. You see how effective it is for communication? If you say, the around 42-year-old middle managers might have an objection. That is just much more abstract. It's less abstract, but it's fake, sort of. Ellen doesn't exist, but it helps communication. I think Sony Ericsson, when they made phones in the last 2 years, I saw that they had 12 personas for their customers. And that was the customers that they tried to sell to. But they had different phones for some of the personas than for the others. They are like some high-end users and so on, of course. In 90% of the projects that I see in this course, there's one persona. But I think it's good to do more than one. Especially since, let's look at this, especially since they are not usually alone. So here we have the business customer chain. You often have a user, but you have a leader, you have a purchaser, you have an administrator. So it's like the previous example. And you need to understand who is involved, roughly speaking at least, and tailor your product and service so that it works reasonably well for all of them. And especially for the long term, it's the user that is the most important. It's not enough to do that because you also need to show that it works. So customers don't value benefits or features that they don't see or don't understand. So make sure their communication to these on the points that interest them. Let's look at the consumer customer chain. In the consumer customer chain, you have families, and families have parents, and then they have larger children or even adult children. They have maybe teenagers, they have smaller children and so on. And of course the parents make the decision. No, they don't. When you get children, you will understand this. You try to make it seem like you make the decision. That's most you can do, but in real life there's a lot of negotiations and manipulations going on. So, of course, Parents are important stakeholders, but a lot of marketing is directed to children, teens, and so on, and then they nag the parents to buy it. So the parents have the wallet usually, but in the case of the business chain, you might have a pretty good structure where there is a purchaser, but first you have to convince the leader, decision maker, and then the purchaser, and then they have the users. So you can model that. Here it can go back and forth all over, completely crazy. Could be that the teen decides what kind of phone mom will buy, because I can't have my mom have a Samsung phone, you have to have an Apple phone, and all these things. Then we might have an extended family. You might have grandparents, and you might, for the older children, have girlfriends and boyfriends and so on. So that also is interesting. What is the need of a young adult that has found a partner? It's a lot of different problems to solve. Or if they don't have found a partner and want to find one, I think a lot of the products marketed to teenagers are about increasing the hope of being attractive for the other gender or the same gender in some cases. And since consumers are such a big category in the market, marketers have developed some creative names and ideas about segments. So, for example, do you know what whoopies are? You heard about that? Yeah.
The 80s, 90s popular young adults with the suit with the large.
Yeah.
Always had the latest tech.
Yeah, no. But that's also interesting. It might be those, but now they're 80 years old. So well-off elderly people. A very, very strong segment in purchasing power because their kids moved out. And if you're like 70 today, 75, maybe 80, you can still be very healthy. Go on. And previous generation of older people, they just sat at home and did the knitting and played with the cat and fed the pigeons. But these guys, they're going hiking in the mountains and traveling around the world and buying cool things, new cars and things like that. Very, very attractive segment for consumer marketing. Did you hear about dinkies? That's double income, no kids yet. Very, very nice situation in life where you graduated from university and maybe you found somebody, moved together, and you have two salaries and no kids. Very also attractive segment, right? Did you hear about tweens? They're not exactly small children, but they're not yet teens. So they're maybe 9 to 12 years old or 8 to 12. And they also have a lot of influence on the purchases for a family. They might decide where the family go for vacation or what kind of play console they get and what kind of car that is okay, etc. Even big decisions they try to influence. Then, of course, they have everything they consume for themselves, which could be quite a lot if the parents are allowing it. Okay, so you see there's space to the right is the ecosystem customer chain. And they are all different. Of course, families are different, but usually the parents are older than the kids and so on. There's some structure here. But all ecosystems are reasonably different. So when you try to produce a product or service, let's say you try to invent a new tire for cars. Usually you will go to the car makers and ask them to adopt the tire. Maybe it's a tire that can't get a flat, it cannot get punctured. And they might like it, the end customers might like it. But then they have the garage that needs to be able to repair and replace these tires. And in any innovation, there will be small volumes initially. So if there's somebody in the middle here, like a service provider, that has to make an investment, you have a problem. So you need to map the whole chain for an ecosystem innovation, and everybody needs to be happy. Otherwise, if just one part of it, one actor is not happy, it will block the whole thing. It doesn't matter how much value it has for the end customer. So we'll talk about ecosystem and so on a little bit later. But just wanted to give you this nuanced picture and encourage you to develop more than one persona for your projects. So for the business customers chain, you have to win the key stakeholders. For the consumer one, you have to win some target customers. Who is going to be influencing this decision? And either you convince the parent to open their wallet, or you give the other side, the kids usually, good arguments to persuade them, right? And for ecosystem, you have to get everybody on board. Everybody has to have a win value out for everybody, right? This is a good place for a break.